tonight we've renamed it the Billionaire Inside because of our special guest, Donald Trump. Donald Trump defines the American success story. He's one of the world's most successful real estate developers. He's the star of the NBC hit show The Apprentice and author of 7 bestsellers. His new book is called Think Big and Kick Ass. He's chairman and president of the Trump Organization. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Donald Trump. Donald, every single person here is so thrilled that you made the big trip and came from Manhattan across the George Washington Bridge. And everyone here has been inspired, Donald, by you, by your story, by your books, by your show, whatever it may be. And it all begins with an amazing story of how passion rules your life.
Well, it does. It's all about passion. I see the way you deal, and I see the passion that you have when you're doing, and you're doing so well. But I learned a long time ago from my father that it's all about passion.
And he worked not 4 days a week, not 5 days a week, not 6 days a week.
He worked 8 days a week. He just loved it. And other people would go on vacations, and his friends, I'd see his friends, and they were all unhappy. And my father worked all the time, literally 7 days a week, all the time, and he was a happy guy. And somebody said to me, where did you learn, you know, this so-called ethic? He never sat down. He never spoke to me about it. He never said, oh, you got to work, you got to work. But I watched him. You know, I was smart, and I'm young, and I watched my father. And he built buildings in Brooklyn and Queens, and he loved what he did. And he was actually unhappy if he had to go away for a day. It wasn't a question of 3 or 4 days, but it was like a day. So I think I learned a little bit by osmosis, through osmosis, that that's the way to be. And I like to work. I enjoy working. Most of the people in here enjoy working.
Donald, one thing that people think about when they think of you is you are determined, you are dogged, you are tenacious. I mean, you have been engaged in some of the biggest fights of all time when it comes to getting what you want. How do you have the ability to say, all right, I want this, and I'm going to put my head against the wall and put my head against the wall and put my head against the wall until I win?
Well, I hate to say this, but to a certain extent, you're born with that. You're born a fighter, and I've seen a lot of people, they want to fight, but they can't. But I've enjoyed a lot of good fights over the years, and we've had some fun doing it.
Donald, you have a great story about the west side of Manhattan, and anyone who lives in Manhattan knows that you can't drive past the west side anymore on the highway without seeing a plethora of Trump buildings. And a few years ago, there was nothing. But how many years did you sat for a long time on that property before you could do anything with it?
I've actually been working on that property for over 20 years, and now it's really taking shape. It's been an amazing success. It's called Trump Place, and it goes from 72nd Street to 59th Street, and it was tough. 3 community boards, meaning you had to go through 3 different communities to get it zoned. Everybody said it was going to be an impossibility. But I didn't give up. I fought. And actually, in the early 90s, when things were very bad, I was fighting for zoning, which actually was a good time to fight for zoning because nobody in the city thought it was going to happen. And frankly, if it did happen, it wasn't going to get built because times were very bad in New York at that period of time. So I went, I fought, I got the zoning. People were shocked by that. And I got a job built that's been spectacular. It's been a spectacular success.
And another thing that you say, this is great. I think that Donald has a story here. You might have a story here that's going to excite people. That sometimes getting to the top, you don't always have to be nice. And sometimes when people do bad things to you, it's all right to do bad things back.
Well, you know, there are a lot of bad people out there. And you really have to go. If you have a problem with someone, you have to go after them. And it's not necessarily to teach that person a lesson. It's to teach all of the people that are watching a lesson, that you don't take crap. And if you take crap, you're just not going to do well. So be smart, be sharp. It's all about this. You have to have this to start off with. But you can't take a lot of nonsense from people. You have to go after them. I've always believed it.
We've got some questions for you.
Hi, Mr. Trump, you've done great things in your life, and I just wonder, how do I, as an average person, begin? Like,
Well, first of all, never think of yourself as average. You started off with the wrong question because you're not average. You've got a lot going. I see you're smart. I see you're very beautiful. And you're right against Erin. Look how beautiful she is. But, you know, I don't see any difference. So you have to tell yourself that you just have to get that word average out of your vocabulary, and you have to tell yourself that you're great, and you have to believe it. If you can say it and don't believe it, it doesn't matter. So just go out there and work hard.
Hello, Mr. Trump. Thanks for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Did you personally know what you always wanted to do with your life, or did you develop the dream over time?
Well, actually, I applied to the USC School of Cinema, and I was going to make movies. I always wanted to make movies, or I was going to be a professional baseball player. And I actually had tryouts, and I was always I was the captain of my team, and I was always a really good baseball player, and other things. I love sports. But in those days, you know, you made no money in sports, and who knew what was going to happen. But I actually wanted to make movies. And a friend of mine came up to me and said, you know so much about real estate, it would be a waste if you didn't do it. What I think I've done, to a certain extent, I've put show business into the real estate business. So I've really been able to combine it. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Trump. My name is Frank Mesa, and being a native New Yorker, I just want to thank you for revitalizing our city. I don't think anybody gives you enough credit for that, so from the bottom of my heart, thank you. And my question is...
What a nice question. I love this guy. Go ahead.
And my question is, as a 37-year-old man, do you think it's too late to change your life around and start from the beginning, start from scratch, and start to succeed in a whole new way?
Well, you're a young, handsome guy. 37 is really prime time. So the answer is absolutely not. I don't even say it's too late when you're much older than you are, Frank. I think that if you're smart, and you do have to have it. The fact is, some people have it, some people don't. The really smart people are the ones that can see whether or not they do. And you know, there's nothing wrong with having a great job and working from 9 to 5 and having a wonderful family and going home with a good paycheck. But being an entrepreneur is a special talent. And you have to know within yourself, Frank, whether or not you have that.
We do have a question tonight from Singapore. It's a truly global set of questions. Let's hear it.
Greetings from Singapore, Mr. Trump. My name is Nance Chong Como, and I found that some retail chain stores, they were very popular, but went into receivership a few years later. Today, I've bounced back with different businesses. Many people talk about their success, but few would share on their failures. Mr. Trump, how do you find success after a failure?
Well, look, in the early 90s, I had a lot of trouble. We had a real estate collapse. Everybody was, I mean, half of my friends were going bankrupt. They were good builders, good developers. They were in deep trouble. I was in very deep trouble. I owed billions and billions of dollars. I never went bankrupt, but I'll tell you something. I certainly used the word a lot in terms of my own thought process. The fact is, you just have to keep on chugging. You have to keep going. And I had an expression. This was 1990. And I came up with an expression that was used by a lot of magazines, survive till 95. I had to survive. I survived till 95. And today my company is much bigger, much stronger, much everything. I mean, it's a solid, unbelievable company, but much bigger than it ever was in the 80s. And that was prime time for me. 80s was very prime time. This is much better. So if you focus, if you stay focused, if you know what you're doing, if you learn your subject, but if you really love what you're doing, you're going to succeed. You're going to succeed.
And Donald, I think that it's interesting when you say that. You've got to love what you're doing. Because I think a lot of people don't realize that that's what it's all about. It's go in and just put in the time, do whatever it takes. But if you lack the passion, it just won't happen.
Even if it's not as good a business. You know, some people say, what businesses? Now, I can tell you, go into oil, go into real estate, go into different things. But if you don't like those businesses, you're not going to do very well. And I have friends that went into businesses that aren't as good as real estate and oil and various other businesses. They become very successful in a tougher business because they loved what, I don't like what they do. I would never want to go in their business, but they loved what they were doing, and they become very successful.
All right, to have the right billionaire mindset, here's what you need so far. And we're going to be calling them your Trump traits tonight. Well, you need passion. You need to be tenacious. You've got to be willing to take risks. And remember, revenge can be good. We'll have more with Donald Trump and the Billionaire Inside in just a moment.
Coming up, the skills you need to get what you want.
You have to be able to size up your opponent. I call them an opponent because when they're on the other side of the table, that's what they are. They're an opponent. If you can't do that, then it's called get a job.
And later, a brush with greatness.
This is the way you feel good, right?
Absolutely. And I
You see my, look, come here. Is it real?
wow, I can't believe I'm getting to do this.
Look, is it real?
It's real.